are these people?
The next story is holy sheep shit.
Meanwhile, at the Legion of Doom.
That's basically what we're talking about. Now, this is all from Indie Media Award honorees because we like to celebrate those guys. Celebrate Indie Media Award honorees like Matt Kennard, who was a co-founder of Declassified UK, has now since moved on and is doing some independent stuff. He's working with Apolitical, which is another channel I saw out there, British channel. He's been doing some things with Double Down News, but he put this out, and this was quote tweeting Alan MacLeod, another honoree for MintPress, another honoree. We're just going to go straight up. A few times. Middle East editor of the BBC News, previously worked as news editor for the State Department, the U.S. State Department. Yes, that is correct. While in post, he was informed that he was actually working for CIA, and he was absolutely thrilled about it.
Did you ever work for the CIA?
For decades, MI5 has had to approve every journalist the BBC hired. May still be the case. So that was a quote tweet of Alan going, what? So he found this somewhere in the Jewish Telegraph about a gentleman by the name of Raffi Berg. So we're going to learn a little bit about Raffi Berg.
Raffi Berg.
Right. Now, my question is, now that line says, quote, one day I was taken to the side and told, quote, you may or may not know that we're part of the CIA, but don't go telling people. Now, this was admitted. Go ahead.
Do you remember a particular other, like, CIA cutout telling the Gray Zone, like, we didn't know if there was CIA people in the thing, and the, you know,
that was the NED.
Like, there might have been. Sounds very similar to me, for sure.
Something like that.
You know?
So this came from the Jewish Telegraph, which I also find interesting and strange. Raffi had joined the BBC as an online reporter back in June 2001, just before 9/11. Huh? How about that?
Just before 9/11.
And he was the first person at the corporation to break the news of 9/11. Well, we all know why that was, because he kind of knew it probably in advance a little, but allegedly, I don't want to get us in trouble, but whatever. Anyway, my question is, why the fuck would he be stupid enough to admit that to a journalist? Even if it was at the Jewish Telegraph and he never thought it would get out, what? They kind of train you up to never admit that stuff to anyone, let alone a reporter. So, what's going on here? But let's also remember, and Kit Clarenberg, another honoree, friend of the show, friend of the network, might also add, BBC Verify is fronted by Mariana Spring, who not long ago lied on her CV trying to get a job for an NED-funded independent media outlet in Russia.
Oh, see? I knew the NED would show up here. Of course they are.
Okay. This is true. Yep. So, so we've got that going on there. So, I went to 2024
that name on there.
honoree, Normal Island News, friend of the show, friend of the network. Also, apparently the BBC has a guy whose job it is to cover for Israel. Well, now you're getting a paid post on top of it. I didn't even know that. So Snarky Laura says, it has been reported that the BBC has an editor whose job it is to whitewash Israel's war crimes. You'll be astonished to hear the accused editor is not me. His name is Raffi Berg, and it's claimed that he has full control over the BBC's coverage of Gaza. Remember when Gary Lineker was driven out of his job as a football presenter for not being neutral enough on Israel-Gaza? Thankfully, that standard doesn't seem to apply to pro-Israel news editors. As someone who's written a book called Red Sea Spies praising Mossad, Raffi Berg is the most neutral Middle East editor the BBC could possibly have. Red Sea Spies was written with large amounts of input from Mossad and, strangely, offered no criticism for the Israeli spy agency. Huh. Excitingly, Mark Regev and an Israeli ambassador called Ohad Zemet attended the launch of the book because they loved it that much. Even better, Benjamin Netanyahu keeps a copy of the book on the shelf behind his desk. Berg even boasted about this on Twitter like any impartial news editor would. Gross. Raffi Berg once worked for the U.S. Foreign Broadcast Information Service, which just happens to be run by CIA. He has a proud history of writing IDF puff pieces and flattering articles about illegal Israeli settlers. He even attended a rally in support of Operation Cast Lead in 2009, a massacre of 1,400 Palestinians. So as you can see, he is an all-around good egg. You'd therefore think that everyone at the BBC is delighted with its editorial direction, as I am, but surprisingly not. More than 100 employees have signed a letter accusing the BBC of failing to live up to its own editorial standards, but I'm proud to say that when the letter was offered to me, I drew a dick on it. I'm so mature, unlike those fuckers at Drop Site News, who spoke to 13 BBC whistleblowers but didn't speak to me. Remember, this is a parody of Laura Kay, who is a BBC host. Okay? Drop Site News. Fuck Drop Site News, by the way. They may have broken the story, but fuck Drop Site News. That's Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill's bullshit propaganda, not really the Intercept outlet moved over to Substack that they're lying to everybody about. That's still funded by the Intercept, largely, and they admit that, and that's cool.
Coming to a Substack newsletter near you.
Yeah. She says, if Drop Site News spoke to me, I would have explained why covering for Israel is a brilliant idea, which is exactly why I'm going to do now. First of all, it's unfair to be attacking one man when another man on the BBC's editorial guidelines and standards committee was Robbie Gibb. Someone so neutral, he was the owner of pro-Israel propaganda outlet The Jewish Chronicle. Clearly, Israeli propaganda is a team effort, just one in which the concerns of the team are ignored, as they are apparently have been in complaint after complaint and meeting after meeting. Every sensible person understands the job of the BBC is to water down criticism of Israel and make false equivalences so it looks like both sides are equally to blame for genocide. Right, Piers Morgan?
Mm-hmm.
In case you didn't know, remaining neutral on genocide means not being too critical of the side that's committing genocide and suggesting that the victims had it coming. This is how impartial journalism works. Again, tongue firmly planted in cheek throughout this entire article. International law clearly states that if someone is ruled to be plausibly committing genocide by the International Court of Justice, you have a legal obligation to cover for them, just in case the world's most powerful court got it wrong. If you mistakenly accuse Israel, you'll make Zionists in New York feel sad. But if you cover for Israel, the worst that can happen is that loads of Palestinians die. Obviously, Zionist feelings are more important than Palestinian lives. Right? In one particularly impartial move, the BBC framed Amnesty International's declaration that Israel is committing genocide as Israel rejects fabricated claims of genocide because the population keeps growing, except we covered that they stopped counting before October 7th. Just know the world's most prominent human rights organization does not have as much credibility as the people who bomb hospitals and call their victims human animals. However, to be balanced, the BBC ignored both the evidence presented by Amnesty and the confessions of Israeli politicians. That's fair and balanced for sure. Sensibly, the BBC delayed publishing the Amnesty story for 12 hours to reduce its impact and didn't bother mentioning it on any of its flagship news shows. Why bother? As a result of the suppression strategy, the story only reached a third of the people it would have been expected to reach. This shows just how important it is to suppress stories the establishment doesn't like. Other brilliant strategies employed at the BBC include referring to ethnic cleansing as evacuations, pretending that a teenage girl murdered by the IDF was standing near Hamas fighters, removing mention of Israelis chanting "death to Arabs" from the earlier version of an article, and not reporting that Israel was blocking aid into Gaza, even when this is admitted by the British Foreign Secretary. David Lammy is his name. He's a douchebag. Also that there is a decree in the IDF or IOF that they can murder up to 10 civilians for every alleged Hamas fighter that they think they're going after.
Yeah. Which we all know that would work. So that just means do what you want.
Right. Yes, the BBC is even more pro-Israel than the politicians who are blackmailed by Mossad. When one fact check by BBC Verify undermined the Israeli narrative about the IDF firing at aid trucks, that fact check was ignored in a BBC article written by Raffi Berg. Of course. His article didn't even mention that Israel kept contradicting itself, or that human rights organizations had presented evidence that contradicted Israel's lies. What else was Berg supposed to do? Inform you? Berg allegedly published a story which glossed over the fact that the IDF set a combat dog on a man with Down syndrome. We all saw that, mauling him.
Oh, covered that.
Soldiers locked the injured man in a room for a week. He literally called the dog Habibi and tried to pet the thing. They ordered his family to leave. His family later returned to find his decomposed body, but the original story barely mentioned what took place, presumably because no one could think of a positive spin. Shockingly, the story was later updated to stop the woke mob complaining about the BBC's coverage of one of the worst murders in human history. I guess some people will whine about anything. BBC News is the second most viewed website on the internet, after Normal Island News, of course, and therefore needs to ensure it does not upset Israel, even if it means upsetting its own staff. It turns out even senior managers at the BBC are concerned that the Gaza coverage is damaging the organization's reputation, as if there is one, but we can't admit they're powerless to do anything because Israel's in charge of the relationship. We're not supposed to acknowledge this under any circumstances, so please pretend I never said anything. Just know that Netanyahu could fire Keir Starmer if he wanted to, never mind the managers at the BBC. And that's Laura at Normal Island News. Apparently, we're all going to have to start paying to read her outstanding journalism, which I'm disappointed to see because I thought that she was going to make it free, but I understand that if she's going to post stuff like that and risk getting arrested like Richard Medhurst, that I can understand why she's paywalling it, and we'll have to probably support her. She's also on Blue Sky. You can buy her a coffee, or you can buy a subscription here on
Coming to a Substack newsletter near you.
Haha, I stole it from Reef. So Alan did a little bit of a deeper dive on this and looked at this guy's LinkedIn. Okay. Lowell, the BBC editor, literally used to work for the State Department and the Associated Press, by the way. Remember that I've been talking about how the fastest way to disseminate propaganda worldwide is using the Associated Press and Reuters and the wire services. Right? Alan wrote a fucking phenomenal article over at MintPress. Everybody needs to go read this. This is must-see, must-read stuff, right? And this is the deep dive dossier on Raffi Berg. That was Laura's kind of haha about it. This is literally like everything that he did, where he was, all right? That the U.S. State Department's Foreign Broadcast Information Service was, by his own admission, a CIA front group. He's currently the subject of considerable scrutiny after 13 BBC employees spoke out to Owen Jones, who we don't like, and Drop Site News, who we definitely don't like. But we liked Alan, so I'll take this. All right. Claiming, among other things, that his entire job is to water down everything that's too critical of Israel, and that he holds wild amounts of power at the British state broadcaster, and there exists a culture of extreme fear at the BBC about publishing anything critical of Israel, because he instills that fear, and that Berg himself, again, plays a key role in turning its coverage into systematic Israeli propaganda. Yeah. So,
I mean, my only problem with this is that it feels like they're putting a lot of blame on one guy, in this system. And it's like, plenty of you could have said something, So,
well, they did.
I don't mean like
They did,
MacLeod, I just mean people
some
there.
Well, no, what they did was 13 of them spoke up to Owen Jones, who then published this over with Ryan Grimm. Now, my concern here is that both Owen Jones is a known Zionist. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on there. So this whole thing is suspect. All right, maybe he was bragging, but it doesn't seem so. But he also is a journalist that didn't want to see necessarily that biased coverage because it was over the top. I don't know. I'm not really, again, I never read the drop site article because I won't give Ryan Grimm even that view.
Yeah.
Screw that guy. But I will give, like I said, Alan a view. Alan dug up this person's LinkedIn bio, and you can see where they worked and that they've been in broadcast media on behalf of the CIA for decades. Right? Berg does not dispute that he was, in fact, a CIA man. That was a 2020 interview with the Jewish Telegraph. Said he was thrilled to be working with the agency. Right? CIA, however, is not the only clandestine spy agency which he has a long history of collaborating. He wrote a book about the Mossad. Glowing, as we said. All right? Talking about the Israeli operation to clandestinely smuggle Ethiopian Jews into Israel. We all know what they did to the women there, too. Also,
we talked about that. They
sterilized the women against their will or without telling them. All right? Lionizes Israel and its spies without, it's perhaps unsurprising considering how much input Mossad had in its creation. All right? He's fed. He is completely taken care of, fed, and one of their boys. All right?
Did you ever work for the CIA?
Of course he did. But it wasn't just the CIA, it was Mossad because they work hand in hand. Right?
It's a mystery. It's a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma.
That a BBC Middle East editor would not only frame these images and documents and put them pride of place in his office, but also chose to display them while talking publicly in an official role is telling. They're talking about the book that Netanyahu keeps behind him. The BBC suspended 6 of its reporters for simply liking pro-Palestine tweets. And yet overtly pro-Israel advocacy has been treated as entirely unproblematic because they're allowed to murder as many people as they want. Well, look, UK is providing the spy flights to allow them to do so. So is it really that much of a surprise? No. All right. It's entirely possible that a pro-Israel stance would help one climb a ladder at the BBC, an organization long known to display strong bias in favor of the country and its interests. Again, remember where Israel was cut out from and who gifted the land to, quote unquote, the state of Israel. Came from Balfour Declaration, the Ottomans, City of London.
Yep.
All right. One of his first BBC articles profiled the Israeli military and its recruits, presenting the IDF as brave protectors of their homeland. God. Right. Then you have extraordinary revelations. Shortly after Operation Pillar Defense, he was promoted, becoming the head of the BBC's Middle East desk.
Of course he was.
He has helped turn the network into
fail upwards.
Systematic Israeli. he's just doing as he's told, and that case is not necessarily failing. I mean, but a micromanager, numerous journalists reportedly attempted to notify management of their issues with Berg, but their complaints fell on deaf ears. Almost every correspondent has an issue with him. He's been named in multiple meetings, but management just ignores it.
Uh-huh.
Why? I tried to find somewhere that, remember that somebody reminded us, I think it was Gordon, everybody in the UK has to pay a BBC license. It's like part of their taxes.
Yes.
So they're paying for this propaganda on top of everything.
Berg is alleged to have made extensive pre-publication edits to other stories, changing the framing of news events to shield Israel from blame, whitewashing the Israeli attack on Shireen Abu Akleh.
Right.
BBC's text, allegedly penned by Berg himself, read, "Violence broke out at the funeral in East." Where'd it go?
I wanted to
move
make it a little bigger. I wanted to make it bigger. Sorry.
Violence broke out at the funeral in East Jerusalem of reporter Shireen Abu Akleh, killed during an Israeli military operation in the occupied West Bank. Her coffin was jostled as Israeli police and Palestinians clashed.
Jostled
as it left a hospital in East Jerusalem. We
watched Richard Medhurst do a thing. Watched it again recently because we talked about my origin story about 6 weeks ago, and we watched that clip where he goes, "Jostled. You said she was jostled. They tried to pull her coffin down and knock and attack her pallbearers, and killed during an Israeli military operation. Who killed her?
Occupation."
Who killed her?
Yeah.
Thus, Abu Akleh's murder by Israeli forces was downgraded to a mere death during an operation, which, with no perpetrator mentioned, like we said, while a police attack on a funeral procession was presented as a clash between rival factions, presumably of roughly equal responsibility. All right. And there's other whitewashings that have happened. Israeli soldiers, here's the one with the attack dog and the Down syndrome guy. The lonely death. They actually had to change the headline. Israeli soldiers set an attack dog on this disabled man and watched him bleed to death. You'd never guess this from the BBC headline, though, of course. I believe that they had to change that. What was this about Tariq Haddad? I just saw something. All right. Whatever the veracity of the drop site allegations, the undisputed fact that a former U.S. State Department and CIA operative is calling the shots at the BBC for its Middle East coverage is undoubtedly of public interest. Why is the CIA having control over the British foreign state-run media and its coverage of Israel? Weird.
And why is all this stuff pushed through intercept cutouts on top of that? Whatever. Just me.
Okay, again, it bears a striking resemblance to the accusations of journalist and Indie Media Award honoree class of 2023, Tariq Haddad. In 2019, Haddad had resigned in frustration from Newsweek, claiming that the outlet systematically stymied him from covering the important Middle East news stories that didn't align with Western objectives. Perhaps most strikingly, though, he claimed Newsweek employed a senior editor whose only job was seemingly to vet and suppress controversial stories in the same vein as Berg. This editor also had a similar background with state power, as Haddad had concluded that the U.S. government was basically controlling and blocking his stories. And he said, when I resigned from Newsweek, I did so because all reporting on foreign affairs went through a particular editor who in my case turned out to be connected to the European Council on Foreign Relations.
Yep. Which is like their NED, right?
Yep.
I remember correctly.
Well, Council on Foreign Relations is much higher. It's like one step above the Bilderberg Group and the World Economic Forum. Implications of former national security state operatives dictating global media output are profound. This is not at least in the least because the State Department and CIA are among the world's most notoriously dishonest and perfidious institutions. I love that word, perfidious. Regularly injecting lies and false information into public discourse and to further Washington's ambitions. As Mike Pompeo famously said, we lied, we cheated, we stole. I was a West Pointer. We couldn't do that. Furthermore, both organizations have a long history of organizing invasions and coups and, of course, color revolutions in foreign countries, drugs and weapons smuggling, and human trafficking, allegedly, operating a worldwide network of quote-unquote black sites where thousands are tortured, allegedly. CIA in particular has an extensive record of penetrating media outlets. As far back in the 1970s, Operation Mockingbird, the Church Committee Unearthed, a secret project to infiltrate newsrooms across America with secret agents masquerading as journalists. Investigative reporter Carl Bernstein's work found that the agency had cultivated a network of over 400 individuals it considered assets, including Sullenberger, the owner of the New York Times at the time. What's really funny to me is
you
that,
mean Carl Berenstein?
The Berenstein Bears? No, Woodward and Bernstein.
Correct.
No, that's Woodward and Bernstein.
The Bernstein Bears.
But the funny thing is that Carl Bernstein's partner that got famous with him became one of those 400 individuals considered a CIA asset. Bob Woodward puts out CIA propaganda regularly. All right. Now, again, we talked about John Stockwell, former head of CIA task force, talking about we pumped dozens of stories of Cuban atrocities and ran fake photographs. Frank Klebenstein, what? Even drop site media, I believe, is often fed fake stories by their CIA contacts, and they can't deny that they have CIA contacts because they're getting way too much shit. All right. And we're going to talk about CIA contacts and all that stuff in the next article. Hey, how about that? A tie-in. All right. Process continues this day, like Havana Syndrome and bounties on American soldiers in Afghanistan. And let's not forget about the story of giving Viagra to the soldiers and them committing rape on people because that fit their narrative.
Yep.
Cable networks routinely employ a wide range of former State Department or CIA officials as personalities and trusted experts. Former CIA Director John Brennan is employed by NBC News and MSNBC, while his predecessor Michael Hayden can be seen on CNN. Top anchors such as Anderson Cooper and Tucker Carlson have their own connections to the agency. Deep. Very deep.
Tuck.
Very deep. Okay, then he's talking about Dawn Scalise, who's a 33-year CIA veteran, left her job as a national intelligence manager for the Western Hemisphere at the DNI to become the global business director of the international news conglomerate Reuters. Like I said, fastest way to disseminate propaganda worldwide is via the wire services, AP and Reuters. This was a political hire that was barely hidden. In Scalise's official announcement, they declared her primary responsibility would be advancing Thomson Reuters' ability to meet the disparate needs of the U.S. government. Oh, yeah, also don't forget about Catherine Marr, the propagandist that runs NPR now, who used to run Wikipedia for the CIA, who had no qualifications before that. Social media, too, of course, is full of former U.S. national security state agents. His previous MintPress investigations uncovered networks of dozens of ex-CIA officials working at Google. He also found them working at Facebook, or Meta, Twitter, all the TikTok, the Chinese Trojan horse. Very famously, I remember that
you don't stop.
That Reef and Jesse Jett covered that article 2 years ago. We covered that 2 years ago. Sounds like Steve Poikonen over here. Right?
Tic-tac-toe, a winner.
Right. Which is, oh, by the way, TikTok's probably going to get shut down in about 10 days if they don't find a buyer. Trump is trying to negotiate with judges and everybody else to try to keep it afloat to the point that he can let the chains off and let that thing come back up. Maybe they'll shut down for a week till he takes inauguration and says, all right, enough is enough. I don't know how he's going to overrule a court ruling and appeal that also got overruled. You know, they got sustained, sorry. But of course we know that the BBC has been cheering on and whitewashing the genocide in Gaza. Here we go. NED, another unofficial branch of the CIA, has spent millions of dollars funding a wide range of media outlets in the UK. USAID is the third largest funder of BBC Media Action, which is the company's charitable arm, donating over $2 million annually there. So, yes, the BBC itself has faced repeated accusations of pro-Israel bias, which is really funny because if you ask any Israel supporter or any Zionist, they think that the BBC is practically Hamas. It's hilarious. All right.
They think everything's Hamas.
Well, that's true.
You know.
All right. Here.
Like,
Tariq Haddad agreed that much of the network's coverage had been subpar, telling MintPress that the BBC, of course, quote, like many institutions, has fallen way short of their coverage in documenting what Israel has done in a densely populated strip of land we know as Gaza over the last 14 months and prior. Totally agree.
Among many other issues during many other date ranges.
Totally agree.
Like,
Another MintPress article by Robert Inlakesh, 2024 honoree, about the pro-Israel bias in the BBC exposed by those leaked internal emails and internal studies. Yeah, that comes months before the Dropsite investigation. Remember the pattern. Ryan Grimm gets celebrated for breaking news 6 months to a year after somebody else already broke it. This happened very famously after October 7th as well, when Max and the Gray Zone and the Zay Squirrel and several others had reported on the Hannibal Directive, but for some reason, when Ryan published it in December, that's when everybody seemed to notice and be like, oh, okay, I guess so now.
I mean, big.
Yeah, fuck that guy. Fuck that guy in the ear. Fuck him in the other ear. Partially as a result, public confidence in the broadcaster has fallen to an all-time low. I can't imagine why. In July of 2023, again, this is before October 7th, just 38% of Britons said they trusted the BBC to tell the truth, down from 81% 20 years previously. I wonder what happened. And since October 7th, its biases have been put under even more scrutiny. Now, there's a lot of Israel supporters that'll be very happy with that, and a lot of Zionists in the UK that will be. But there's also a lot of anti-Zionists that are not happy about that. All right. Again, this is, like I said, a long article. Here's the end of it. To be clear, this article does not claim that Berg or anyone else at the BBC is a plant. I'll claim it, but...
I will, though.
No, yeah. I'll claim. Nor is it accusing him of any specific wrongdoing beyond working at a distinctly biased network. Except that we have evidence that he specifically changed stories to benefit Israel. So I'll do that. He's a little worried about getting arrested for it, Section 12 stuff. What it is stating is that it is telling that the person in charge of its Middle East reporting has framed pictures and letters of Mossad commanders and high Israeli officials on his wall as if they are rock stars and he is a teenage fan. That someone such as this rose through the ranks is a clear indication of the kind of culture that exists at the BBC, one that has systematically demonized Palestinians and manufactured consent for genocide. Nothing he's saying there would get him in trouble as far as Section 12. He's not advocating for anything to happen. He's not reporting anything that would potentially get him out of school or supporting anything that would get him potentially arrested. We don't want to see that happen to Alan for sure. Alan's awesome. He's a beast. let me see what else. Oh, so not only is it happening at the BBC, and that's the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick, was that our friend Gen X Girl, I don't know if everyone is following at Gen X Girl 1994 over on Twitter. She's awesome. She's been putting together these cool graphics. And hopefully we help her go viral wherever we can. One of them, of course, is Vicegrad, which I know Reef and Colin covered like a year ago, the Polish outlet that has a lot of NED funding as well and ties to U.S. intel community. They're whitewashing Germany's war crimes and what Germany is doing to defend Israel and their whole push toward anti-Semitism, quote unquote, and prosecuting it. Of course, we know they're doing something similar to C.J. Hopkins in creating the new normal narrative and prosecuting anybody that challenges their new normal narrative. All right. We've also got the New York Post is Israel propaganda. Again, not a surprise. How did the New York Post get access to a crime scene? Now, I didn't want to talk about PSYOPs, but this is one that it glowingly jumped off the page at everyone to the point where it was just, if you believed this, why? It just went to show you who it's working on and who the propaganda works on and who it doesn't. Now, first of all, yes, this was a PSYOP. So first of all, what had happened was this woman who works for CNN somehow was given access to the person who had run through a crowd of tourists on New Year's Eve on Bourbon Street, murdering 15.
Blatantly, like, contaminating crime scene, but whatever.
So she gets to walk through an active crime scene, and the way that it's laid out, that, oh, the Quran just happens to be open to a certain page, and all the again, like we talked about,
Mein Kampf is probably there too.
We talked about this with Luigi a few weeks ago when I claimed that Luigi, I didn't think Luigi was the person that did it. An orgy of evidence. This here also is the existence of an orgy of evidence, because if you're not paying close enough attention, it makes it an open and shut case. Well, they found the person, they found his apartment, they found the material he used to do it, they blah, 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 and it fits all together, nice, neat package, send that guy to jail, and it's all over. Nobody has to worry about the story anymore. Except that's not really what happened, and we know that. So Gen X Girl put together this New York Post thing, because the Post, as well as others, are covering for this PSYOP. Why? How did the New York Post get access to a crime scene? Their reporter, I'm Israel Chai. Yeah, what a surprise. All right, puts on her bio. All right, that means long live Israel. New York Post owner Lachlan Murdoch secretly meets with Netanyahu. New York Post owner Rupert Murdoch, who says that in another month, America gets back beside Israel, meaning Trump. All right. The woman who was let in is a woman by the name of Jenny Taylor. She said that, it's a whole mess. New York Post story. Murdoch bought the Post in 1976. We know that. He's also, a staunch Israel supporter. He owns Talk TV that Piers Morgan is on. His son Lachlan has now taken over the outlet and the entire media entity. But what I wanted to do was bring Fiorella, our friend of the network, of course, friend of INN. Fiorella did a whole deep dive on her. Jenny Taylor reported for the New York Post and raging Zionist with Israel ties, magically gets access to Shamsuddin Jabbar's place and finds an open Quran and a bomb-making station, proving he's an ISIS terrorist. By the way, ISIS is on our side, guys. ISIS is pushing to have normal relations with Israel and Syria now. Lamal, worse setup
Secret Intelligence Service
than the iOS fake Hamas secret tunnels. First of all, the yoga pants and the baseball hat is ridiculous. She says that she's not just a Zionist.
Please, come on.
That's right. She's not just a Zionist who said Zionism is a key tenet in Judaism, but her family is in Israel and are OG settlers. Oh. Yep.
Oh God.
Yep. Okay. Texas reporter covering the border. Hablo poco de español. Seen on Fox News, Newsmax, all the Chudley stations because she's a Zionist, so they're happy to have her there. All right.
Yep.
Apart from Israel, Tear's focus has been the border psyop, which has been people volunteering to have the state increase AI and digital surveillance to get those pesky immigrants. Yeah. This entire thing is being done on purpose to promote animosity among U.S. citizens and fearmonger about foreigners while the U.S. gets cheap labor and increases the surveillance state. They're not trying to keep them out. They're trying to keep us in.
Yeah.
Manufacturing consent for war and digital surveillance, but you won't hear that in her reporting, of course. They don't go that deep. She's not allowed. Bring them home. She's reposting the fucking awful Aviva Klompus, who I blocked.
Yeah.
All right. This was Alpha News, gross. Right? A knife intifada. Okay. Forget the occupation. Oh, and nearly 50 attendees of the Nova Festival died by suicide since, allegedly, since October 7th. I don't know if that's a fact or not. That seems like more Israeli propaganda. If they're that traumatized, they shouldn't have joined the IDF to begin with, because the majority of people that were there were ex-IDF soldiers. There were a certain amount that were taken. There were also a certain amount that were taken hostage. And you break that all down, they don't go that deep, like he said. Here's the read the BB quality report here. Yes, thank you, thank you, Colin. Fuck that hoe. So that's Fee. Shout out to Fee. Follow Fee. She's over at Truthwire. That's now that used to be Convo Couch. Now it's called Truth_Wire. Truthwire. Go give them a follow. They set up a new channel. They set up a new channel on Rumble, so go follow them over there. Also look at Beyond Headlines, I believe, is another thing that she's hooked up with. So go check that out. Again, talking about stories like this is why INN gets demonetized. Yay! We're demonetized on YouTube. Now, my channel, where this is actually running live as well, is not demonetized. You could leave a super chat over there. Don't. Please don't. Go to one of these other places. Fuck YouTube. I don't want them getting any money. Cash App, Ko-fi, PayPal, or INNnewsletter.com. That's a great place to subscribe. Tyler Russell subscribed this morning for an $80 annual subscription. Not too much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Bill, your egregores agreed. Fee is awesome. That was a good breakdown. There's a ton more connected with this. The fact that he served at Fort Bragg and the other guy served at Fort Bragg and there's somebody else at Fort Bragg and there's all kinds of nonsense going on with Fort Bragg. That's a psyop to begin with too. Why do they want the the military community at odds and battling each other internally about stuff, and the Navy getting mad at this guy and making the military in general look bad because of this and that? There's a lot of weird shit going on there. Let me tell you. A lot of weird shit.
Crazy Dutch bastard.
She is a darn knockout. That's true. She's also one hell of a good reporter too. That's what Mouse said. Cameras don't do her justice. She's a hell of a knockout.